Well, hey, Ron, how are you doing? Ron, can you hear me? Ron,
I can hear you.
you can hear me. I guess Ron can't
All
hear me. Well, how
right.
are you doing, Aaron?
I'm well. I'm well.
Hello. I can just see myself on the screen today. Today we're gonna do funny things.
We're going to do a lot of fun things today. Welcome, everybody.
There he
My name
is.
is Ken Clark. I'm the regional director for the Southern States. We have with us Ron Hooper, who is the regional director for the Western States, and Aaron
Okay, we are live.
Aaron Duquette, who is just the all-around director of everything. So, welcome, Ron and Aaron.
Glad to be here today.
Hey, Aaron, how are you today?
Oh, busy.
Hey, thanks for queuing up that video.
Sure thing.
Yeah, that was really powerful. What we're going to talk about today, we really
So I don't know if I'm playing an old video or this video. No. Huh.
well, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. We're getting close to the election. So what we want to do is have as many of our volunteers, as many of you people watching the video,
Thanks for queuing up that video.
to call
Sure
our.
Yeah,
that was really powerful. What we're going to talk about today, we really.
So I don't
I'm
know if
getting
I'm
some
playing
feedback.
an old
Somebody's.
video or this video.
Ron, you're going to want to shut off your
No.
speakers there.
Huh.
Yeah, is that coming
Well,
from
we're
Ron?
going to talk about a couple of different things. We're getting close.
Yep, Ron, you've
to
got some
the
feedback
election.
coming in.
So what we want to do is have as many of our volunteers.
I'm
I'll
hearing
mute him for a
myself
second
twice.
there. Yeah.
I'm hearing myself twice. Anyway, so what? Let me rehash. What we need is as many people that are watching this broadcast to call your local state assembly members, your state house member, your state senate member, and ask them whether or not they support term limits on Congress, and then ask them to sign our pledge. And if you'll do that before the November elections, that'll help us get a lot of support going into the January sessions, because we're running out of time. November and December are bad months to try to get politicians to commit to anything. Once the election is over, it's over. They're not going to talk to you anymore. They're going to either have won or lost. Those that have won, it goes back to the old adage, politicians have two problems. One is getting elected, the other is staying elected. And then they're not going to be as willing to talk to us, we the people, the constituents, as they are right now. So time is truly of the essence to do it right now. So we've got a bunch of target states. It doesn't matter if you're in a target state or not. We ask that you call your elected official in your state that is your constituent. You are the constituent of, rather, and get them on board. Aaron, add to that. What have you been doing? You've got a lot going on in Kentucky and West Virginia.
Well, yeah, I guess we can start with West Virginia. West Virginia, we've been active for the last couple of years there, and we've been, had our hands full both sessions, really. We developed a ton of support within both chambers of the legislature in West Virginia, and it had an incredible number of pledge signers in both chambers, and really, for all intents and purposes, had it in the bag and back at 2 sessions ago, and came right up at the last day of session. And unfortunately, what happened is that there was a senator who thought that his voice was more important than the voice of the rest of the legislature, as well as the people of West Virginia, of whom 84% want this resolution passed. And so he filibustered right up to the end of session, and at midnight, everything was dead. And so he kind of took that into his own hands. We definitely responded and made sure that he knew that we're not going to take this line down. And the people of West Virginia got behind us and came back through last year. And ran into a similar kind of issue actually on the House side. We passed the Senate side early and then ran over and came to the last day of session and all that again. And we had all kinds of kind of shenanigans happening. They say, at the last day of session, West Virginia can kind of get into sort of a standoff. Everyone's looking to kind of go after each other's bills. And unfortunately, we were innocent bystander of that. So we're back this year. West Virginia, hey, any legislators watching, you guys did a great job. You've passed this resolution. You just need to do it in the same year. So we need to be there, pass both chambers, get that going, and see this through. It's the will of the people, and it should be the will of that legislature too, without individuals getting in the way.
And
in Kentucky, we're pushing hard. We're developing really kind of a term limits caucus here in my neck of the woods in Kentucky, in southeastern Kentucky. We're developing a real kind of a corridor of term limits pledge signers that of both parties. It's kind of neat in Kentucky. You have kind of an even number between Republicans and Democrats that have signed our pledge. And we're really working on bringing them together to be on the same page so we can fight for this issue. Of course, in Kentucky, we're up against a very famed term limits opponent in Mitch McConnell. The guy's been there since I was 3 years old and has no intentions of leaving anytime soon. So we're up against that influence for sure in Kentucky. And so it's going to take locking arms to do what's best for the state and for the country. And of course, just like West Virginia, the numbers are the same thing in Kentucky. It's 84% crosses party lines. Everyone wants to see term limits on Congress. And so we're going to make it happen. We're going to roll up our sleeves, get a little bit mean, and maybe a little snarl and get it done.
And for those of you that don't understand the process of what we're doing, that's okay, because it is kind of an obscure process. But the Supreme Court back in 1995, Thornton versus U.S. term limits, decided that the states don't have the authority to limit the terms of their own congressional delegations. So they ruled against us. There were 20 plus states that had already instigated term limits on their own congressional delegation. And so Thornton versus U.S. term limits changed all that. In that decision, they also said in order to get term limits on the United States Congress, you have to amend the Constitution. So there are two ways to amend to propose amendments. Article 5 of the Constitution lays out the process. Two ways to propose an amendment, one way to ratify. There's only one way to ratify. Congress can propose an amendment. We all know that Congress will never, ever propose an amendment to limit its own power. So they're not going to propose an amendment to limit their own terms. The states, then, the other way is the states can get together in the form of a convention and propose a limit to limit the term, propose an amendment to limit the terms of Congress. So that's what we're trying to do. We have to have 34 states pass an identical resolution calling for that convention to talk about and propose an amendment. That's all it can do. That's it, period, end of story. There's a lot of fear mongering that goes around behind that process. Don't buy into it. It's all a bunch of lies. I kid you not, and we can prove it. But anyway, that's what we're trying to do. So when Aaron's talking about West Virginia, and when he's talking about Kentucky, we are trying to get that resolution passed in those states so that we can get the states together to propose an amendment. That's it. That's all we're trying to do. But that's everything. That is how this works.
I can tell you, Ken, from just recent work in a number of different states across the country. Right now, we have a team at U.S. Term Limits have been placing a lot of phone calls to candidates that are running right now to ask them if they would sign our pledge of support as a candidate, so that if they're elected, they'll vote for us. And we use that as a plank to get going. And I can tell you, we're starting. I really think that the scales are starting to tilt in our favor. I had a candidate that was really kind of reluctant on the issue. For a number of different reasons, had a good conversation with her. And by the end, she was saying, I'm going to reconsider, actually. You guys seem to have a very measured and reasoned approach. And I think what's resonating is that, we use the tool of Article 5 because we want term limits on Congress. And we're really utilizing that in a way that's going to be it couldn't get any more laser focused. It is explicitly only for the purpose of proposing one amendment, not even a single topic of term limits. It's term limits only on Congress. There's only one amendment that can come out of that. It's very clear that this is an ad hoc meeting for one explicit purpose, to put term limits on Congress. We're starting to see that a lot of people are out there, a lot of candidates, once you explain that in more detail, hey, no, ours is unique in the Article 5 movement, and that we have a single topic, a single focus for this. A lot of people are really comfortable with that. That okay, this is very clear. It's just for term limits on Congress, and let's get in there and use this tool that the founders, told us to use. That's why they put it in there. And what better, topic to use it for? What better cause to use it for? And what better reform to use it for than term limits on Congress, where you have 82% of American voters wanting term limits on Congress, and I'm sure that number has gone up in the 2 years since that last poll. So let's get that done.
The only thing that the convention will truly decide is what the limit on those terms is going to be. Is it going to be 1 year or 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms for both the House and the Senate? You'll probably see some sort of combination, but that's the only thing really that is up for grabs. We do not dictate or put in our resolution what those terms are going to be. We don't say it's going to be two terms for a senator and 4 terms for a member of the House. We don't do that. And there's a very simple reason for that. 2 reasons. Number one, if we were to do that, that's where the discussion would break down. Secondly, all states are going to have to live under the same amendment. So all the states need to get together and hammer it out. And it will be a battle royale. Who are we to decide what those limits on terms are going to be? It's not up to us. It's not up to U.S. term limits. All we want to do is get the states together and have the conversation. If they all can agree, if 26 states can agree, then that amendment proposal will go back out to the states for ratification. The states are the only entity on the planet that has the authority to actually amend the Constitution. Both the states and Congress can propose amendments, but only the states have the authority to ratify it. It takes 38 states to ratify. So 26 states at the convention can agree, then it goes out to the states and they say, yeah, we like it, or yeah, we don't. And they can shut it down or they can approve it. And there you have it. That's it. That's what we're trying to do. We need your help in order to do it. So right now, that's why we're asking, call your state senator, call your state representative, ask them to get on board. If you call them, it makes a lot different. It makes a lot bigger difference than if Aaron does, if our pledge team does, or if I do, or if Ron does. It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I like to just underscore this to death, how nonpartisan an issue this is and how bipartisan the support is. I can't emphasize that more. We have, this, I don't know, sometimes on occasion it can be perceived as maybe a Republican issue because people think of the 90s and you had the contract with America. And I just say, well, yeah, but that didn't happen, did it? So clearly it's not just a Republican issue. Congress failed to get it done then. And so here we are. And you can look on our website, we have both Democrats and Republicans, independents, libertarians, Green Party candidates all over the map politically that agree that we need new fresh faces in DC, that we need reform that's going to undercut the influence of special interest money. Term limits will do that. That'll impact the corruption influence of high-paid lobbyists. This also gets in the way of that. If I'm a lobbyist, I want to buy these guys off and keep them in my pocket for the rest of my career. I don't want to keep starting over in 8 years.
That is one of my most favorite objections is lobbyists love it. It'll empower the lobbyists. And, nothing could be further from the truth because as you said,
that's what lobbyists want you to think.
That's what they want you to think. Lobbyists do not support term limits. If they did, we'd already have it. I mean, we would already have it. But I mean, think about it. As a lobbyist, you invest heavily in the candidacy of XYZ politician. You want that politician to be there for 100 years because you want a long-term return on your investment. You don't want to have to start reestablishing those relationships every 10 years, every 12 years. You just don't want to do it because it costs money. So yeah, let's go ahead and play that other video.
So, for example, here, just underscoring the bipartisanship, it's an example. I kind of went on a rant about Kentucky here because I'm a little bit biased living there. And this is an example of one of our pledge signers. He actually kind of video recorded. This is way back in the early days of COVID-19, and we had the quarantine going on. And he signed his pledge sort of in real time with his daughter as a witness. So let's actually just play this and watch this together. You can see he very articulate in his reasons for why he wants term limits on Congress. And I think that regardless of your party, when you're watching, you can see this and say, yeah, those are my reasons too.
Hey, good afternoon, Shelby County. I'm Will Barnett, and I'm running to be your next state representative. And this is my youngest, Sarah. Say hello, Sarah. There you go. What I wanted to talk to you about today was term limits, and just briefly. Of course, if you've talked with me in person, you know that I'm an advocate for term limits on the state level. No elected official in state government should make a lifetime career out of that position. And along those lines, neither should anybody at the federal level, whether that's Congress or the Senate. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about briefly today. What I have here is a pledge from the organization U.S. Term Limits that says, I pledge that as a member of the state legislature, I will co-sponsor, vote for, and defend the resolution applying for an Article 5 convention for the sole purpose of enacting term limits on Congress. Now, the reason Sarah's here with me today is for me to sign this, I need a witness. Sarah's going to be my witness, but all of you are going to be witnesses as well. So, she is going to sign that where it says witness. Now, if you're not familiar with an Article 5 convention, the state legislatures have the power to call for a convention for the sole purpose of amending the Constitution or submitting amendments to the Constitution. And that's what this would be, is that if I were elected and served as your state legislator or your state representative, that should such a resolution come about, that this is my support for that. So she's got it signed. Let me sign that here. This is thrilling video right here. Very interesting. Very interesting. Term limits good. Signing paperwork. What is today? Do you have any idea what today is?
The 6th.
The 6th. The 6th. We've been home. I've been home for 22 days. Maybe we're just losing track of time. 4, 6, 20. There we go. All right. So here it is. Pledge signed and witnessed by Sarah. And we're all ready to go. So should I get the opportunity to be your state representative, you can bet that this pledge means that if that convention is called for, that Article 5 convention, we will be trying to pass term limits on the U.S. Congress. And I support that in the legislature as well. So that's it for today. Take a second, check out the website at www.votewillbarnett.org. You can send me email.
Did we get cut off? I can't hear you anymore, Aaron.
Sorry about that. I was muted and I forgot.
Yep, I couldn't hear you anymore.
We're back. We're back.
That's awesome. What state was he from?
He's in Kentucky, out in the sort of the western part of, sort of the central part of Kentucky, Shepherdsville. Yep.
And you've got an event coming up in Kentucky pretty soon. Well, you're working on it. Maybe we shouldn't go over that. You just
No, we can tease that a little bit. Yes, we have an event, and maybe possibly 2 events coming up in Eastern Kentucky. Panel discussions on term limits. So I'm just going to put that out there. I'm not going to tell you who's coming. I'm just going to let you know it's there. So anyone's in Kentucky, keep an eye out on Kentucky term limits, and we'll keep you updated. I just wanted to point out, how he mentioned, the witness there and his daughter, but also he mentioned all of you are going to be witnesses as well. Sometimes what we hear, and it's sort of a slough off remark from a candidate, and more often from an incumbent legislator who just doesn't want to go on paper in support of term limits on Congress for various reasons, but also doesn't want to go on record against them either. They'll say, well, my word is my bond, so you have my word. Well, I think for Will here, his word is his bond too, and he went out and was very public about it and made a video about it so that you can hold him accountable to it. But how many times do you know when you watch a politician give their word, and if it's not sort of recorded and put down, and they can change reality later on all they want. So we appreciate when candidates actually step up, put their neck out, and actually push for this reform that we need.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it takes you to put the pressure on them because, there aren't that many. There are those there, but there aren't that many politicians that actually their word means something. Most of them will, and I mean this, most of them will say or do anything to get elected. They will say or do anything to get elected, and they'll say or do anything to stay in office. It's a shame, but that is the way it is. And so knowing that, I mean, it's human nature. Let's face it. Human nature dictates that you will try to accumulate as much wealth and power under your own control as you can. That's human nature. Why then would we expect someone to go to Washington, D.C. and become all of a sudden virtuous? They won't. So we need to remove their ability to be corrupt. We need to remove their ability to have too much power.
Right.
And so term limits is a great way to do that. It is the first step for a lot of other reforms. So do you have that other video queued up to play?
With the testimony?
Yeah.
I sure do.
Let's play that one.
Okay. Let's
I'm
jump
gonna go
in.
ahead and mute and then try to get my dogs to quit barking.
Good idea.
I don't know if you can hear me, Aaron, but it's not playing. I don't know if you can hear me, Aaron, but it's not playing for some reason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senators, for providing me an opportunity to address this important issue. I want you to imagine for a moment that you are an employer and you've got some problems with your employees. When you hired these employees, they promised they would do exactly what you asked of them. But once they got the job, they became a nightmare. They stopped listening to you and started using the job to line their own pockets. They took the company credit card and racked up more debt than you could afford to pay back. They became so obsessed with keeping their jobs that they forgot to do their jobs. And after all that failure, all that disappointment, and all that incompetence, your employees came to you and said, "We deserve a raise." If you're a reasonable person, that should make your blood boil. And yet, that is exactly what it feels like to be an American taxpayer. The first three words in our Constitution are "we the people." It's written larger than anything else because the framers of that document, the architects of our republic, wanted to remind you at all times who's in charge. We the people. We are your employers, and you have an obligation to listen to us. So I come to you with a message from the American people. We demand term limits for members of Congress. In fact, according to the most recent national polls on the issue, 82% of Americans want term limits. That includes support from 89% of Republicans, 76% of Democrats, and 83% of independent voters. This is not a left or right issue. This is an American issue. In fact, term limits could be the only issue with support from both President Trump and former President Obama. Now, there was a time about 25 years ago when Congress was debating this. Nearly every opponent of term limits up here had the same rebuttal: experience, experience, experience. We need experience to do this job right. If only you leave your Congress member in office for decades on end, he or she will become such a policy expert that all our problems will be solved. In hindsight, that was one of the worst predictions ever. This system is broken. Congress has given us $22 trillion in debt, the longest war in American history, a broken healthcare system, a broken immigration system, a tax code written by lobbyists, an explosion of money in politics. Worst of all, too few here have the courage to address these problems because the only focus is on getting reelected. That's why it comes as no surprise that Congress has a 14% approval rating, and 60% of Americans say that they would fire every single member of Congress if they could. Congress is less popular than traffic jams, root canals, and hemorrhoids. You're beating head lice, but the lice have asked for a recount. Unfortunately, elections alone cannot fix this problem. Not because voters like you guys so much, but due to the nearly unbreakable power of incumbency. At the same time members of Congress publicly claim elections are free and fair, they secretly deploy every trick in the book to keep power. Incumbents get $9 in special interest money for every dollar that goes to a challenger. And if incumbents are having difficulty raising money, not to worry, they're allowed to send campaign-style mailers at taxpayer expense. That's to say nothing of all the free media and name recognition politicians naturally get just for being in office. The incumbent advantage creates a barrier to entry for everyday Americans without the connections to fund a campaign. It is the case for term limits. Elections may, in theory, be capable of dethroning incumbents, but that isn't how it works in the real world. Congressional incumbents have a 98% re-election rate. That probably explains why Congress looks more like a country club than a melting pot. It's predominantly made up of lawyers and politicians and is disproportionately old, white, rich, and male. Term limits would give us a legislature that better reflects the diversity of our society. The message long-term incumbents send to young people like me seems to be, we want you just close enough to the political process to help us win, but don't get too close and take our jobs. The American people have lost confidence in this Congress, and for good reason. We routinely see abuses of power. 18 months ago, it was revealed that members of Congress were secretly using taxpayer money to settle lawsuits, some for sexual harassment. You still haven't disclosed how our money was spent and on whose behalf. So term limits is a check on arrogance, it's a check on incumbency, and it's a check on power. It's a way to restore political courage while bringing fresh faces and ideas to Washington. As Ben Franklin said, for the rulers to return among the people was not to degrade them, but to promote them. As Kanye West said, no one man should have all that power. Here's the dilemma we face. Over 80% of Americans want term limits to happen. Donald Trump and Barack Obama want it. It is being blocked purely by the self-interest of Congress. If this were a trial, you all would have to recuse yourselves because there is a colossal conflict of interest. If term limits pass, you won't stay in the limelight forever. You won't be the center of attention, and some people might even stop laughing at your jokes. You'll have to become ordinary citizens. And that is, my friends, the entire point. We're asking you to do what's right and listen to the people you represent. It's time to bring the gravy train into the station, end the reign of career politicians, and give Congress back to the people. Please support Senate Joint Resolution 1 for term limits. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is an amazing video. I absolutely love that. Nick is our executive director. He did a terrific job. Where, as I had explained earlier, there are two ways to propose amendments to Congress. The first one is Congress can propose amendments, and that's exactly what he's talking about. We're not leaving it entirely up to the states, but we know as well as you do, Congress isn't going to do it, but we're still trying. And so we're putting pressure on members of Congress to try to get it done. But the way it's actually going to happen is for the states to get together and propose that amendment. That's why we need your help inside your state to the politicians that are closest to you, your state assemblymen and women, your members of the state house, your members of the state senate. If we can get your help and you can put that kind of pressure on them, we can get this done. Aaron?
Well put. You put it right. You know, folks, we're not going to get this done without the states stepping up to the plate to get it done. And I'm also going to break it to you. The states aren't going to step up to the plate without their constituents letting them know this is a priority issue. This is not something we'll deal with it later. Sometimes we hear, well, it's really a federal issue. I'm focusing on local issues. Sorry, but this is a state, local, federal issue. This affects every level of government in our republic, and it affects people on the ground. 82% of American voters want term limits on Congress, and if the states have the ability, and they do, to term limit Congress, I'm sorry, it's a priority. And so we need you guys to check out the link that's shown below, and click there. Send a message to your state legislators. Let them know. I want you to step up to the plate. I want you to step up and sign the U.S. Term Limits Pledge for term limits on Congress. Hey, step up and co-sponsor. Step up and maybe be lead sponsor. Let's get this thing done. It is not going to happen on Capitol Hill. So it's got to happen on every other Capitol Hill in this country, and it's going to have to really start on Main Street. So that's why we're reaching out to you guys today. Main Street needs to march on up there and let them know this is a priority.
Amen to that, brother. Thank you so much. Go to our website. It'll show you how to get involved. You can find both mine, Aaron, Ken Quinn, and Ron's contact information on our website. We're there. It's termlimits.com. Very simple. Just termlimits.com. And please join us in this fight because we need to get it done now more than ever. Now more than ever. You've seen the chaos out there, and Washington's broken. So with your help, we can get it fixed. That's all I've got.
All right. Same here. We'll go out with a little video kind of recapping what it is we're doing and how you can get involved.
Thank you.
And is frequently the case, pardon my stumbles here today, ladies and gentlemen, I run into folks while I'm on my tours of duty at the state capitol, and the other day I ran into a gentleman, had a brief conversation with him. I saw his lapel pin or something, said, hey, there's a guy I need to talk to, and that is Scott Tillman. He is the National Field Director for U.S. Term Limits. It is a national-based organization, and they are focused on creating a term limits situation for Washington, D.C. Of course, we're very familiar with term limits here in the state of Michigan. We've had them for over 2 decades. And this effort is similar. And so when I saw Scott, I thought, hey, you know what? I really have been paying attention to a national term limits movement for Washington, D.C. But as popular as Congress is or is not, maybe it's time to talk. So, Scott, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So why don't you just give us kind of the basics on who your organization is, where you're based, and then we'll start talking about your particular strategy. Again, I hadn't really been focused on the idea that there was a national level campaign. I know it's kind of been a state level thing. So let's kind of walk through it all.
Going back to the late 80s, early 90s, many states got together and, the Citizens and States with Citizens Initiative, like Michigan, ran initiatives to term limit their own state legislature, as well as a lot of states term limited their congressional delegation. And people thought that was kind of counterintuitive. Why would you term limit your own guys? But people love term limits that much and support them that much that they saw that as a practical way to do it. They figured when we got to a certain number of legislators being term limited, they'd probably just go ahead and term limit everyone. Then in 1995, so about, I want to say it was 26 states had gone through that process and put term limits on their own delegations. And then there was a U.S. Supreme Court decision that said states couldn't term limit their own delegations. Anything had to come through a constitutional amendment. So obviously states were still able to term limit their own state legislatures, just they couldn't term limit their congressional delegations. So for a few years, we were working just on state and local term limits and whatnot. And then we most currently, just a few years ago, we started to push for resolutions, because there's 2 ways in Article 5 of the Constitution to amend the Constitution. One is through Congress, which we've seen lots of times. The other one is through state legislatures. So we started this new push for that method. But we have an office in Florida and an office in D.C., and we have a presence all over the country.
All right, and as you were mentioning to me, you're the National Field Director, but you do have personnel across the country, and you're doing the state by state. Let's again, just to remind listeners, a little civics lesson, as I have taught high school students civics over several years. The 2 mains for amending the United States Constitution would be either a proposal from Congress itself, adopted by 2/3 of the House and the Senate, and then sent out to the states. That is how the 27 amendments we have to the Constitution today were adopted. Or, as your strategy is to have 2/3 of the states, is it 2/3 of the states request pass a resolution calling for a convention to consider amendments to the Constitution, and so it would be a convention to adopt a term limits amendment?
Yeah, for an amendment convention, it would require 2/3 of the states. And then for anything to be approved, the Constitution has very specific guidelines that anything to be approved is 3/4 of the states. So it's a little bit lower bar to just have the amendments discussion. And then, for the amendment to be approved, it would take 3/4.
Okay. Well, now, I've heard repeatedly, and this is a question that I know I'm sure you're here all the time, is there is the claim that if the states call for a convention to consider amendments to the Constitution, that there is no capacity to restrict it, that a constitutional convention once called can run the gamut and could rewrite the whole Constitution if it wanted to. And there has never been successfully a call for a constitutional convention through this mechanism. Where do you come down, and how do you guys explain that or address that issue, saying we only going to call a convention to discuss the amendments that would allow for term limits?
Well, in Article 5 of the Constitution, it specifically says that, an amendment can be called to discuss amendments. since we're acting within a constitutional allowance, this is written into Article 5. This is one of the two ways. It can't go off the rails. The Supreme Court operates underneath guidelines of the Constitution and would say that anything that was operating outside of what the delegates were sent to do would not be allowed. So the process, states would get together, the states' legislatures issue these resolutions, and then the resolutions, of course, have to be on the same topic, because there's been actually several hundred different resolutions on a myriad of different topics over the years. And what the courts have said, because some people have been out there and challenged and said, we've had so many of these resolutions that we think there should be a general convention. And the courts have, declined to hear that, because they say they need to be on, what Congress has done is said they need to be on one subject. And unless they're on one subject, we're not going to allow this thing to take place. So the courts and Congress have indicated that, anything that does happen will have to be on one specific subject. And to expect that the courts would allow that to go off the rails and do something different is a big leap, especially since anyone in the United States would be able to, bring a case and say this is, not what is authorized by the Constitution. And then, of course, there's always the ultimate. If somebody did propose something that wasn't, and somehow the convention went along with it, which, states can actually recall the people they send to the convention if they're afraid of that. There's a lot of different checks in the system, but it only takes 13 states to shut it down. Anything that 13 states don't like has no chance at all. So there's a lot of ways to stop it, and a very, very narrow path to achieving a convention to discuss specific amendments.
All right, again, we are talking with Scott Tillman, the National Field Director for U.S. Term Limits here on 1320 WILS. So, Scott, if you're taking the state-by-state approach until you get to the two-thirds of the states, how many states do you have that have passed some sort of a resolution? And you say they have to be on the same subject. Do they literally have to be the same proposal? Because I looked on your website before we came on the air here and saw that you're proposing 3 two-year terms for the U.S. House and 2 6-year terms for the U.S. Senate. Do all the states have to pass that framework, or would it be possible that you could say, okay, the term limits amendments could be discussed, but maybe we would lengthen it to 4 or 5 House terms and 3 Senate terms? So how uniform do these resolutions have to be, and how many have you gotten accomplished?
So we're operating under the assumption, which everybody else who's trying to achieve some specific amendment operates under, and that is that they have to match up exactly. Now, the 3 House and 2 Senate terms that you saw on our website, U.S. Term Limits has 2 programs that we're working on. One is our resolutions to go through the states, and for those we have 2 currently. We're early in the process, just a couple years in. We have Florida and Alabama.